Okay, let's start it. Folks, this is Dave Slavic, Wild, Virginia. We have a pretty huge list of people who would like to speak tonight, which we're thrilled by, but it also means I'm going to try to talk as little as possible in setting everything up. But I do have to run through some things. First, thanks so much for being here. We think this is really important. The fact that 70 plus people want to speak means that this was important to people. And so we're happy to be doing it. And please forgive us if there are glitches. We don't have the technology and the wherewithal that the state government does, but clearly they're not willing to use theirs and we're using ours. So we're going to do the best we can. I have to thank Grace Tuttle and Russell Chisholm from Power, who are here as co-host, Jess Sims from Appalachian Voices, and Misty Bose from Wild, Virginia. We have worked really hard to put this together. I have a list of things here, so forgive me. We ask you not to put a lot of, don't make testimony in the chat. Let's put it that way. That's for messages about logistics and what's going on. We're going to post some things there for you, but make sure if you're making comments that you're doing it in your slot. We will unmute you when it's time for you to speak, and we're going to go through an order so that you can have a clue when you're coming up. Let's see, we will be making a video and a transcript of this whole thing, and we will be submitting those so the Water Control Board has access to them. As you saw in the announcement, we suggest times. We suggest no more than 3 minutes or around 3 minutes for folks. We're not trying to be authoritarian about that, but as I say, we've got a huge crowd. So the best you can do, sticking close to that is great. You can take extra minutes if somebody else is willing to donate them, and just let us know who's donating to you. Let's see. What we're going to do is we're going to put people's names 5 at a time in chat so you know who's coming up next. And then I can call on those folks one at a time as we get there. I think we have a document that kind of gives you the whole lineup so you can predict where, at this point, where you're likely to show up tonight. We have tried to accommodate people who wanted to move up or back. You know, we're just going to do the best. If we call you and you're not here, we'll come back to you later on. I see Delegate Hurst is here. Welcome, Delegate Hurst. We're gonna give you a slot pretty near the top here. So just a little bit. Let's see. When you speak, say your name and your city, where you're from, and if you're representing an organization, say that. Since we're recording, and I have to remember this, try to speak fairly clearly because the voice recognition stuff is good, but not as good as it could be. Okay, partners, what did I miss? Help me. Nothing? Okay. Okay. Well,
yeah, Dave, just one thing to flag. We should have closed captioning services for this, a live transcript. If folks want to follow along, you just go to more live transcript and then enable the live transcription, which you can have at the bottom of your screen, or you can also hide that view. And then I put it in the chat, but when it is your turn to speak, you're going to be moved from the attendee list to the panelist list, and it's going to send you a message that you're consenting to that. So please accept it, and there will be a 1 to 2 second delay as you move over. Then you'll be able to unmute yourself and speak. And for those that are on the telephone, I am unable to make you a panelist, but I will be able to unmute you when it's your turn to speak.
Great, thank you. Now we're going to start in the down the list, and I pulled rank here. I'm going first, in part because I want to do my best at helping keep this thing running smooth. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I do have some slides. So if we can get those up, I will tell you while we're doing that, several people, I guess Misty Bowes, Grace and Jess donated some time to me, but I promise I'm not going to try to take 12 minutes if I can help it. Try to set the pattern there.
And Dave, I'm going to show yours. I'm having a little trouble with presenter mode. So you'll have your slides, the upcoming one on the left, a little bit smaller. So bear with me just a second.
Okay. Okay, there we go. All right. Let's see, we're not at the top. We need to go up. Okay, so there's so much that I can talk about, but I tried to narrow down a bit. And first, I wanted to talk about the significance of the hundreds and hundreds of violations that MVP has already had, and why that's particularly pertinent to what the board has to decide. One of the big things, of course, is that a lot of those violations have also involved problems, damages to water bodies and wetlands. And that's really important because DEQ is proposing that the board approve a bunch of new activities that will add new pollution. And it's important to know what's already been done to those water bodies before you decide to add new pollution. In fact, certain of those water bodies are in pretty bad shape because of what's been done to them, and they shouldn't have anything added to them. And again, the board can't know whether water quality standards will be met, which is the standard they're supposed to uphold, unless they know the whole picture. In DEQ's fact sheet that went along with their draft permit, they frankly had no analysis, no specific information about damages or impacts that have already been done, what the baseline condition is on any of these water bodies. And that's kind of the basic thing that should be in a fact sheet, and it's just not there. But we got a lot of information from some FOIA requests to DEQ, including thousands of what they call action items from their contract inspectors. So we know a lot about where certain impacts that even DEQ and the state acknowledge as being problems. And there's a lot there that they are not including. One thing I'll note is that when EPA wrote the Corps of Engineers and said to the Corps, we don't think this is, you should approve this at this time. We don't think you have all the information. One of the things they stressed that has to be there is an assessment of what the baseline is before you add these extra impacts. Next slide, please. Okay. So the other part, of course, of all those violations that is really important is that it's been so widespread, so frequent, such a systemic problem that it is not believable without a lot more evidence that MVP can or will do any better when it comes to these stream crossings than what they've done in the upland areas. If DEQ had worked into the draft permit additional protections, additional things that would insist on better practices, that might make a difference, but that's not there. So we have no reason to believe, based on history, that the future will be any better, especially because MVP wants to make hundreds of water body crossings in a very short time, which means they'll be rushing headlong forward. and they are likely to be just as reckless as they've been so far. Next slide, please. So we have done a pretty comprehensive view of the inspection reports, hundreds and hundreds of them from DEQ, and over 7,500 action reports from their contract inspectors. What we found is at least 33 water body crossings that have apparently been completed in Virginia. We're not certain even that that is all of them. One of the problems is that in at least a quarter of those, MVP went ahead and did the water body crossing without giving DEQ prior notice that they were doing it, which they were specifically required to do. And the real significance of that is that if inspectors didn't know, couldn't be out there, then they couldn't document what was really happening. They won't know, can't know if problems were caused during those activities. And so that further weakens their ability to ensure us that new crossings will be done in a sound way, and that they can be done without water quality problems. Next slide, please. So when we look at the reports of where they did actually complete some crossings, we find some real damages. So again, there haven't been a huge number in Virginia, but of those several dozen that did occur, there are some very significant damages and some definite problems with the way they managed that work. I'm going to show you a slide in a minute that shows you an ugly circumstance. But there were bunches of instances where the inspectors said, okay, this thing was completed 2 months ago and you still don't have it stabilized. This thing was completed 6 months ago and it's still not stabilized. And so that's a theme that we saw in a number of places. Next slide, please. So this is one of those horror stories. This is one of the places where apparently a crossing was done. DEQ was not told beforehand that it was happening. And as best I can figure out, they didn't even know for a number of months after it happened. But then after it happened, we had a whole series of events where you had this kind of problem. This was 2 months, 3 months after the crossing was completed. This scene you see here, where the stream was just inundated with mud. And then there were at least 2 other incidents in the following month or so where they had the same kind of problems. Now, DEQ, after it was all done, said that MVP had remediated the problems. Well, I am not confident that I even know what that means. What we understand it might mean in some cases is they go in with shovels and buckets and clean out as much of the mud as they can. Our concern is that that's not necessarily the best way to work in a sensitive headwater stream that has sensitive species and that you're not supposed to be treating that way. And I will say here too, as it says, in November of 2019, which is what, 14 months after the crossing was done, the inspectors went back yet again and said, no permanent water bars on either side of the stream where they're supposed to be. So this is just one of those stories of a crossing that already happened. It had very substantial problems, and it's a warning for what new crossings could look like. Next, please. So from the so-called upland work, we know citizens have documented lots of problems, lots of violations. Even FERC and the company have documented lots of violations. But I focused specifically on what DEQ and its inspectors found, because there's plenty of really bad stuff there. One body of instances affected about 10 water bodies, streams and wetlands, where huge amounts of mud blanketed stream beds and in a couple cases wetlands for hundreds or thousands of feet. And DEQ acknowledged those as violations. And in fact, they were illegal discharges because that specific deposition of sediments couldn't be legal unless they were already covered by the Corps' 404 permit and a 401. So again, even though it happened, DEQ kind of said, well, okay, go and dig some of it out and we'll move on. Next slide, please. Not a lot needs to be said about these next 3 or 4 slides, but this is what a whole series of really valuable headwater streams look like. And I keep going back to that term headwaters. If you're not familiar, small streams in the headwaters in the upper reaches of watersheds, especially in the Appalachians, are some of the most valuable habitats we have. And the literature makes very clear that they have an outsized influence and value for the whole river system. MVP wants to cross hundreds and hundreds of those small headwater streams. And so some folks may say, well, this is a little bitty stream, it's not that important. First of all, each one of them is, and DEQ claims they look at each crossing. But second, in the cumulative, in the combined impacts within different size watersheds, they are incredibly important. Next slide, please. Again, this is not what a small stream flowing through a nice wooded area is supposed to look like. Next slide, please. We had mud sometimes 7 inches or deeper, sometimes as much as 3,600 feet in length of a stream covered with mud. We had notations even in the DEQ reports that said, clearly aquatic life can't move through this stream the way they're supposed to, which should be obvious, but that in itself is per se a violation of water quality standards. Nobody can look at these examples and say that water quality standards were not violated. Next slide, please. But again, the point is that this happened several years ago in some of these streams. But what's the condition now? What is left after this basically carnage was allowed to occur? Are these streams truly in better shape now? Or are they so degraded that to add any kind of additional impacts through these crossings would just be totally unacceptable? Next slide. So we wanted to know, how did DEQ think about that? What did they look at? How did they make that analysis? And again, this is not supposed to be them just saying without any proof, any backup, that everything's going to meet standards. The procedures that DEQ uses in every other context with permitting and allowing certain water pollution incidents is they go through a process. They have a fact sheet that actually spells out, this is what's there in the water body, this is what would be added, this is why it may or may not meet standards. But so we ask for all that kind of really specific information through a Freedom of Information Act request. And you know, there's kind of a detailed list of what we were asking for, but again, we were playing off the kind of concern that EPA mentioned. You got to know what the baseline is. You got to know what it looks like today, so you know what will happen if you add more pollution or you make more changes. You should know physical, chemical, and biological characteristics of those water bodies. Again, that's all the kinds of things that EPA pointed out, and they're absolutely necessary if this board is going to make an informed decision. Next slide, please. So what was the answer to that for you, where we asked for these analyses and these real facts? we got a pile of photographs. As far as I can tell, none of them even have a label or tell me exactly where we are. In general, we know what water body they're related to. They don't describe what they purport to show. They don't describe even generally when they were taken. We also have just a couple of other items in those files, but there is no analysis. And our request was very extensive and very specific. So if they made any analysis, then they should have provided it. So this tells me they didn't bother. There is no mention of water quality standards, no mention of anti-degradation, no mention of things like baseline. So the upshot is that the job they were supposed to do, the information they were supposed to give the water board to support an approval is simply not there. It's not in the fact sheet and it's not in the record that they're holding at the DEQ because we looked for it. Next slide. So again, to go back to some of those water bodies where they were just covered in mud, this is a small watershed in the headwaters of the North Fork Roanoke River called Flatwoods Branch. Two of those really bad incidents happened in that very same small watershed, blanketed two of the small tributaries to Flatwoods Branch. One of them, as I mentioned before, covered 3,600 feet of this small creek. The other one, a couple hundred feet. And what you see on there, all the little dots are additional crossings that they want to make. Wetland and stream crossings. And so they affect all of the same streams that have already been damaged, been harmed, and will really affect this whole small part of the river system. It's important, of course, to recognize that these flow into the North Fork Roanoke, which has the endangered Roanoke log perch and natural trout and all these other species. So this is important for the larger picture. And so I'm going to stop there. As I say, there's so much more that I could get into. I hope it didn't run over my time too much. But now I think I'm going to get to call on Delegate Chris Hurst. Thank him for being here, and we're excited to have you speak, Delegate Hurst.
And Dave, while I'm doing that, if you could say your name and city for the record.
Oh yes, I'm Dave Sly in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I represent Wild Virginia.
And this is Jess from App Voices speaking. When I am moving you from attendee to panelist, you should receive a prompt that you need to accept, and then you'll be moved to panelist.
Okay. Delegate Hurst.
Hi, I'm actually, sorry, Troy Garrett. I'm Delegate Hurst, Chief of Staff. Most of you know me. He actually had to step out of the room for a moment. We have an event going on the other side of the room, so he had to step out. So if there are other people that would like to go first, if we could go ahead and move them up, and then he will be glad as soon as he is finished to come back in and speak to the group.
Okay, we can do that.
All right.
Okay. Let me make sure I know who's next here. Would that be Roberta Bondurant next in line? And
Dave, while you're getting that set up, I just want everyone to know that while we're going through, just so folks know like about how long 3 minutes are, I'll be holding up a sign. So don't feel pressured, but I just want you to know about how long you're gone as we're going through all this. Thank you.
And again, we don't want to be heavy-handed, but just remember there's lots of people after you. So Bert.
And Bert, you may have to hit *6. You are allowed to speak, but you may have to hit *6 for it to come through.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. Excuse me. Hello, I'm Roberta Bondurant. I'm from Bent Mountain, Virginia for the past 26 years. I am a member of Preserve Bent Mountain and co-chair the Protect Our Water Heritage Rights Coalition. I appreciate you all organizing this, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the board this evening. I did not have the opportunity to speak at earlier local hearings, we will be submitting additional documentation in the form of written comments. I wanted to speak, I appreciated your intro, Dave, and partly because of the massive information you've collected, I wanted to sidestep here a little bit and talk about process. I think that is equally as important of what you and many others have unturned in the way of substance. I'm going to make about 5 points here. An example that I could start off with is the debacle at milepost 262.3 in October 2018, when the Fourth Circuit had just vacated the nationwide 12 no stream crossings. MVP nevertheless was able to build almost entirely up to that stream crossing. They did so, they trenched across almost a half mile of that property, in addition to the other property across Little Creek, which is at the juncture of the Blackwater. And they could do that because they had an upland certification. So much of the problems with direct sedimentation to stream crossings are about the upland certification, and that would allow the company to work despite the impacts to stream bottoms, as they did at the Angle crossing. And that day, just untold volumes of sedimentation on October 11th, 2018, rolled into the Blackwater by way of Little Creek Crossing and many, many other open areas across Franklin County. A second problem in terms of process is what I see as, and what many others see as, the potential dysfunction of an inspection system that has only 3 directly employed staff inspectors with the state agency. In addition to that, there are a certain number of independent contractors, in addition FERC and MVP inspectors. That process in itself, not having the independence, true independence of people not directly paid or indirectly paid by MVP, becomes a problem in terms of the loyalty, the fealty of those inspectors towards their job and towards the true purpose of protecting Virginia's waters. Third, I wanted to describe a problem we saw in the original permit hearing and bring that to the attention of now what we have are at least 3 new members who may not be aware of this process. But at the time in 2017, December 2017, Robert Wayland sought to hang on to the ability to pull back the permit and reflect on the permit when water crossing problems and other problems were happening. He thought, as did several others, that they retained that authority. They tried to exercise that authority in 2018, late 2018. That fell through in their decision to revoke. They then in March 2019 decided to revoke their decision to revoke under pressure by MVP. An additional problem that was brought up, as I understand it, by board member Tim Hayes, who continues to sit on the board, was a question as to narrative standards and the use of those standards in permitting. But in the end, my understanding is that only a technological standard prevails, such that when inspectors enter the field, they are operating on the BMPs, the best management practices. That's a technological standard. It's been explained to me. Last but not least, I want to talk about the agreement, the enforcement agreement that MVP likely wrote substantially and engaged in, which DEQ signed off on in, let's see, I believe that was also 2019, a year after the enforcement action was started by the Attorney General. That makes exceptions, essentially self-regulated exceptions of flood, act of God, and there's a catch-all for let's see, excessive rain, which is what we've seen a lot of this fall. And so all these things go into what is a fairly lax enforcement of the construction of this project. I'd also like to point out, although not directly related to stream crossings, but invariably stream crossings relate again to wetlands and groundwater. And that is that our now Director of Water Permitting, Andrew Hammond, in 2014 to 2016, I believe, at the time of the original DEIS, sat as the acting director of drinking water in the Virginia Department of Health. At that time, that office recommended to FERC in the DEIS that a 2,000-foot sanitary survey be conducted in order to complete any advanced permitting of the route for MDP. That was set aside, and what now exists for landowners, for example, such as Linda Parsons Fink in Montgomery County, and others were aware of approximately 4 others who encountered water problems during construction in 2018, is the burden is on the landowner to show the nature, the amount, the fact of damages in order to get recovery under any amount set aside. So those are essentially my comments. I'd like to say overall that we can't gloss over procedural problems. We can't put lipstick on this pig. We cannot make right a project that is rotten to its core, that we've shown already has deposited just unspeakable sediment and damage to our creeks, streams, and rivers. The board's direct obligation is to the people in this permit process. What we cannot accept ultimately is for anyone to tell us that this project is quote unquote so big. This project, landowner to landowner, community to community, should be reviewed with a fine-tooth comb by this board. We thank you for your time and your protection of our waters.
Thank you, Bert. I will say to other folks, if you thought Bert went past 3 minutes, she was allowed to because she had been donated some time also. So don't be offended by that. If you get donated some time by somebody else, let us know. Other than that, we really do please ask you to try to hit that 3-minute mark. Now it looks like Delegate Hurst may be back, and if you are, we're anxious to hear from you, Delegate Hurst.
He is still not back.
Okay.
Go on to the next one. I'm sorry.
That's all right. We'll check back in.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Rick Shingles. I believe Rick is here, but there we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're in.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I didn't have the right buttons pushed.
All right.
I'd like to thank you for allowing me to present today and join others in this. I'd like to refer to procedural matters as my understanding of them. The Department of Environmental Quality.
Rick, can you share your the town that you're
I'm sorry, sure. I'm a resident of Newport, Virginia in Giles County. I am a member of Preserve Giles County. I am chair of the New River Valley group of the Virginia chapter of the Sierra Club.
Right.
I'd like to speak to procedural matters. The Department of Environmental Quality wrote a a draft certification for the Mountain Valley Pipeline for the Water Control Board. And it's based on assumptions that would violate 401 certification, the 401, Section 401 of the Clean Water Act. The act requires the state to certify that projects with potential to discharge sediment will not infringe on existing water standards. The draft written by DEQ says in part, quote, "The board has determined that there is a reasonable assurance that the Virginia water permit, comma, if completed, complied with, that's a big assumption, will protect upstream, in-stream beneficial uses, will not violate applicable water quality standards, will not cause or contribute to significant impairment of state waters or fish and wildlife resources." It goes on to say in the ensuing permit, the board has not taken into consideration the structural stability of any proposed activities. And that paragraph, those are unsubstantiated assurances to the public. There's nowhere in this that they indicate they did any of the things that David Sly talked about in terms of using best management practices to get a baseline and have a system in place to monitor construction before, during, and after to see if there's long-term consequences. In effect, the document as I read it begs the question that questions that DEQ must address before issuing a permit. The fact that they don't believe that paragraph is implied to me by the fact that the document goes on to acknowledge that Mountain Valley Pipeline back several years ago purchased compensatory credits for damage it would do to Virginia waters. So why are they purchasing credits if in fact those assurances are true? And so to keep this short, I went ahead and reminded them of best practices based on a review I did of recent major publications of best practices for in-stream construction, pipeline construction through water bodies. And then I asked, then I made the following comment to them. I hope I have time to say it. MVP is a private enterprise whose fiduciary responsibilities is to its investors. It is not, it is not in its interest to acknowledge serious obstacles to its ventures or provide detailed information that might jeopardize its own profits. Best management practices and monitoring cannot be left solely or primarily to the applicant. The Virginia Water Control Board's responsibility is to maintain existing riverine ecosystems. It must ensure water quality standards preserve healthy, sustainable populations of indigenous species in the Virginia waters. It should not approve a 401 permit in this instance because Mountain Valley Pipeline has failed to prevent and DEQ has not considered the full impact of open cut construction on all affected Virginia water bodies. It should not provide a permit without a fully informed framework based on best management practices applied to all planned water crossings. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. I think what I'm supposed to do is give people a little heads up of who's in line next if you haven't seen the list. So we'll try Delegate Hurst again, but just so you're ready, Suzanne Keller, Susan Bonney, Karen Davenport, Mary Beth Coffey, you're in line next, but let's try Delegate Hurst one more time. Nope.
No, still not ready.
All right.
You get to keep it at me though.
Let us know. You can put something in the chat if you want to.
I will. I'll let you know when he's on his way back.
Okay. Okay, so we'll move on to Suzanne Keller. And again, give us your name and where you're from. And you're on. You're muted.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dave. My name is Suzanne Keller. I'm a member of the Virginia Clinicians for Climate Action. I was looking at the permit this evening. Oh, I'm in Richmond, Virginia. And I was looking at the permit this evening, and there are instances where the permit can be revoked once it's been issued. And one of them is that it becomes a danger to human health. Well, I would like to just talk about the dangers to human health, the impact of this Mountain Valley Pipeline and this water permit. First, there's the threat to water, to wells, springs, and perched aquifers that people need to live. Second, there's a risk to people along the pipeline from explosions and leaks. Third, there's the stress of living in the path of this monster pipeline, including the degradation of historic landscapes, the proximity of the pipe to people's homes, and the taking of their land for the pipe. Other public health impacts include the health impacts of climate change, among many others. In public health, prevention is always preferable to letting harm occur. For these reasons, we ask that the board deny this permit. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Suzanne. Okay, Susan Bonney is up next. Okay, there you are.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
am Susan Bonney, and I'm in Fairfax County, Virginia, in McLean. I am representing, as a volunteer, the Sierra Club Great Falls Group. I'm speaking on their behalf. I am the chair. The Sierra Club Great Falls Group includes more than 5,000 Virginians, and we're in Fairfax County, Prince William County, Loudoun County, and Fauquier County. I speak out against granting stream crossing permits under the Clean Water Act for the Mountain Valley Pipeline. Virginia does not need to contribute more fossil fuel infrastructure in its work to reduce emissions and combat global warming. Pipelines inevitably leak methane, and methane is nearly 80 times more powerful than carbon dioxide in trapping heat in our atmosphere. The Mountain Valley Pipeline would lead to 90 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions annually. And this pipeline would lead to decades of unnecessary greenhouse gas emissions and lower our chances of avoiding the climate catastrophe. We already know more than 300 violations have been proven so far during construction. These violations have produced lasting, damaging impacts on water bodies, the karst topography of the region, and private drinking wells. I know the board has sought public comment about issuing a water permit, and it's not about jobs and business. I ask you to deny the individual stream crossing permit under the Clean Water Act. And personally, the 45-mile Roanoke River Blueway is a water trail. It runs from South Fork, the South Fork of the Roanoke River to Smith Mountain Lake. You can go online and search Roanoke River Blueway and see where you can plan a float trip or a rafting trip. Northern Virginians visit Southwestern Virginia for this natural beauty, the treasure of a river that's unlike any in our region and in our part of the state. And I want to continue to visit and share recreation on the Roanoke River with my friends and family. But putting a 42-inch diameter pipe through water bodies is one of the most environmentally dangerous parts of the Mountain Valley project. The pipe is already leaching carcinogens into the aquifer, and construction is choking the streams and water bodies, and it's an ugly scar across our landscape. Thank you for the time, and I urge you to not to allow the permit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe is that Karen Davenport is next.
I believe Delegate Hurst may be next.
Oh, okay. If you're here, Delegate Hurst, please, you're welcome.
No, he's still not
No?
back yet. Sorry.
Okay,
I'll let you know as soon as he is. I'll put it in the chat.
okay.
Dave, this is Grace. I'm putting a immediate updated queue of folks in the chat, just so
Good.
you know where to find that.
Great. Yeah, somebody had asked about that in Q&A and I wasn't quick enough to answer. Okay, so again, Karen Davenport, please.
Karen's not speaking. It's going to be Louis Strickler.
Okay. Did we skip Mary Beth Coffey? Oh, not speaking. Okay.
Not speaking either.
Okay, Louis Strickler. Okay.
And Mr. Strickler, you may have to unmute, but you are now a panelist and should be able to speak.
Yeah, check your microphone down in the bottom left.
Mr. Strickler, we can come back to you. If we want to go to the next speaker that to confirm is Kimberly.
Yes, Kimberly Homer. We'll go back to you, Mr. Strickland. Don't go away. Kimberly Homer. Okay. There you go.
Hi, I
Hello.
am Kimberly Homer. I live in Blacksburg, which is in Montgomery County. Dear honorable board members, Wood, Jesse Wallace, Cohen, Hayes, Jasinski, Seeger, and Lanier. I'm writing to ask that you please deny MVP LLC's application number 210416 to cross streams and wetlands in Virginia. Water is far more precious than fossil gas, as anyone in California can tell you, and making it safe to drink after it has been fouled is nearly impossible, as anyone in Michigan can tell you. I grew up near the Potomac River in the 1960s when the water was so foul you needed a tetanus shot if you came in contact with it. The Environmental Protection Agency and Clean Water Act have done much to restore the Potomac and other rivers, but they are still under threat. When I moved to the New River Valley in 1980, I was stunned at the beauty of the clear creeks in Giles and Montgomery counties. Recreational tourism and organic farming had been developing, and I've met many people from all over the country who say this is the most beautiful place on earth. I say had been developing because the MVP has already ruined the village of Newport, organic farms in Craig, Giles, Montgomery, and Franklin counties, and is taking aim at the Jefferson National Forest too. Creeks that were hikers and fishermen's paradise lie in ruins. The justifications I've heard MVP, Roanoke Gas, and the Franklin County Chamber of Commerce give for why MVP should be allowed to shove their 42-inch diameter pipes under the streams they have not already sullied are that, number one, the pipeline is almost 92% complete, and number two, Franklin County needs fossil gas to create jobs. And number three, MVP's investors will lose money if they can't complete the pipeline and associated air fouling compressor stations and sell their billions of fossil gas to unidentified customers out of state. Well, over half of Virginia's streams and wetlands are unsafe for swimming and fishing, according to the EPA, and aquatic life is plummeting. Should we just finish them off? If Franklin County really wants to create industrial jobs instead of preserving and promoting their gorgeous recreational assets, they should create an energy storage site. If they really need gas, Virginia's landfills are already producing 90 million standard cubic feet of methane per day. Why not tap that instead of ruining our streams? As for MVP's investors, they have insurance to cover their losses. Our only insurance is you. please protect our streams and wetlands. Our life and that of all the creatures who live in or drink water are depending on you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I don't see Delegate Hurst back yet. So I'm going to call on Kelly Hart. Kelly Hart.
Bear with me 1 second.
Sure.
And I want to make sure we have Louis Strickler still in the queue. If he's available, he could go next, and then I'll pull Kelly to the panelist.
Great. Are you there, Mr. Strickler?
It looks like you are unmuted. If you are trying to speak, Mr. Strickler. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and mute you, sir, and then pull Kelly Hart will be next. Bear with me 1 second.
We'll keep trying. Don't give up. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having this event tonight. My name is Kelly Hart. I'm a resident of Charlottesville, Virginia, and I'm here speaking on behalf of myself and future generations. I oppose this pipeline, the Mountain Valley Pipeline. First of all we have to do is look at the most recent IPCC report that says we must stop burning fossil fuel. This report, the scientific report, along with so many other scientific reports, makes it clear we must stop burning fossil fuel. We must keep this oil in the ground, and to build an infrastructure to carry this oil, this dirty oil across Virginia is madness, and it should not be done. We're facing an existential crisis. We're on code red. Our house is on fire, and we must say no to this pipeline. Secondly, I'm new to Virginia. I'm falling in love with this beautiful place. I came from Hawaii. People ask me, how could you come here from Hawaii? And all I have to do is say, I love that Shenandoah National Park. I'm falling in love with this place. The natural beauty is amazing. And to think that the waterways could be ruined by the oil, by this destruction of this land, it's madness. So it's simple to me. It's simple to me that this pipeline has to be shut down. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Are we going to try Mr. Strickler again? Any, what do you think, Jess?
Mr. Strickler, if you want to try unmuting.
Okay, you're unmuted. Can you hear us? Okay. Muted again. Not.
I think Gwyneth Homer is next, but I'm not seeing them in the attendee list at this time.
Okay.
She is sharing a Zoom with Kimberly.
Oh, great. Okay.
Great.
I'm elevating you now. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Gwyneth Homer, and I'm from Blacksburg in Montgomery County, Virginia. Please do not grant a Virginia water protection permit to the Mountain Valley Pipeline. MVP has not provided enough information, such as the biological and physical data of baseline assessments, to indicate that they are aware of the potential destruction their project will wreak on the water, the land, and the dependents thereof. This oversight cannot be classified as anything other than deliberate denial, as they have a long history of doing environmental harm, including sediment washout, chemical runoff, and erosion. They also have not offered sufficient mitigation measures or strategies that they would use to prevent or address any damage done. This could also be described as ascribed to denial or to the terrifying reality that their damage cannot be undone. The springs, streams, rivers, and greater watersheds that the Mountain Valley Pipeline threaten are critical homes and resources to countless species, including our own. When delicate ecological balances are upset, there are grave consequences. One single creature or plant may seem insignificant, while really it plays a role in its environment for nutrient exchange, habitat creation, sustenance, or protection of others. And if we dismiss one creek as expendable, what will keep us from condemning the hundreds of others? It is this very pattern of neglect that has brought our world to the current climate crisis that we face, in which our lifestyle of consumption has poisoned our water and air, trapped heat in our atmosphere, creating catastrophic weather patterns, and disrupted the ecological balances that had sustained themselves for millennia. If we choose, however, to alter our lifestyles, we may keep this crisis from worsening. By denying Mountain Valley Pipeline permission to cross hundreds of water bodies, we will be denying them the opportunity to contaminate our water with hydraulic fracturing, release methane into the atmosphere as gas leaks from the pipe, and release other toxins as we burn the gas. In short, we will be reversing the cycle, taking a step toward a gentler future. Please stand with the people and the environment, both of whom you are meant to protect. Do not grant Mountain Valley Pipeline a Virginia water protection permit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to try oh, there's Delegate Hurst. I think we're ready for you, Delegate Hurst. Thanks for being here.
Of course, David. I'm sorry that I had to step out there for a little bit, but to David and Jess and Russell and everybody with power, thank you very much for having this hearing. You know, our office reached out to Director Paler at DEQ asking, saying, why are we not going to have a virtual hearing before the State Water Control Board when we are in this age of COVID? And remember, you know, the last meeting I saw many of you at was in Radford, not really the most proximate place to the actual affected landowners, right? So I think we see that it's, you know, not outright hostility, but certainly no bridges are being built to try and accommodate the very concerned citizens that we have here in the 12th district. And, you know, I'm here to continue to highlight what I said back then, which is that I think it's been pretty clear that Mountain Valley Pipeline LLC has not been able to show that they are going to, even in a perfect world, construct this pipeline in a manner that might protect to the furthest extent our clean water, our soil, and our clean air. They have not been able to do that. You know, after the 300 violations we saw in 2018, I was really proud that in 2020, when a new majority took over, and I introduced 3 bills that would have really slammed them on fines and additional penalties for being repeat violators. Worked with many of you on this call to help get one of those bills passed. We still find a very difficult climate on our issue in the Virginia Senate. But that basically was just because they showed a total inability to follow the rules. And when a bad actor has proven time and time again that they cannot follow the rules, when there's been documented cases of violations occurring, meaningful violations occurring too, not just, you know, ticky-tack. I don't understand how on earth we could try and give them any type of water crossing permit to do the really difficult work of making these water crossings. That's one thing that I think gets buried here sometime as we talk about percent complete. It's not anywhere close to being done in terms of difficulty until we go through these water crossings. Maybe in terms of square footage, but not in terms of, you know, the difficulty and the time required. And for them to try and railroad this through would be incredibly detrimental to our clean water and to the landowners who rely on that clean water all the time. We have already talked to some families trying to mete out whether or not their drinking water has been fully contaminated or affected negatively. I can tell you that, you know, I think I'm going to be successful in running and representing this district, the 12th district, for another term. I plan on very much in the budget and through policy, but certainly on the budget, trying to increase the standards we have for water quality and monitoring, and then also making sure that our landowners are given everything they possibly can have in order to make sure that their impacts are minimal at best, as they are still doing some of this non-water crossing construction, and we hope that they deny the permit in order to do those water crossings. I have been following y'all's lead every single step of the way. I have been able to try and amplify your voice by standing on your shoulders, and I do so humbly and so appreciatively. You all have been fighting this now for more than 6 years, and I think it's going to be a testament to all of your hard work when this thing ultimately is never put online. We need to keep the fight up. We need to keep the pressure up. I'm committed and dedicated to that cause in the way that I can out of my office. But to the State Water Control Board, I would continue to say, again, do not let institutional inertia decide the day here. Do not just say because they've come this far, they should be allowed to get to completion. They have not proven at all that they are respecting our land here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, our land rights, our clean water and our clean air. They must deny this permit and make sure that Mountain Valley Pipeline does not have an opportunity to ruin our streams, our creeks, and our rivers more than they already have. David, I appreciate the time to be able to come here and talk to all of you tonight. And please reach out to me if there's anything that I can be of assistance in the future. But David, I'll pass it back to you. And thank you all for having me tonight.
Thank you very much for being here. Okay, I think we're going to try Mr. Strickler again. I'm really hoping we can get you this time, Mr. Strickler. You appear to be unmuted. Well, darn it.
Mr. Strickler, I'm going to go ahead and move you back to the attendee list. This is Jess from App Voices. You may need to rejoin the Zoom and adjust your audio settings. That might be the difficulty, or you can go to the microphone, hit the little arrow that's pointing up and see if you can select a different microphone. So I'm going to put you over to attendee just for the time being, and let us know in the chat if you've been able to adjust your settings, and we'll bring you back.
Okay, thank you. I believe that brings us to Chris Mitchell.
Mr.
Hello.
Mitchell, you are on.
Hello.
Hello.
So, yeah, let's all have a good environmental. Let's all have a good environmental future, if you please. When it comes to all good water and things stuff, let's, as always, go green. Going green for a better environment is the key. It's what it is for a better environmental life. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. And can you share what city you are coming from today for the record?
I'm checking in from Williamsburg here in Virginia.
Great. Well,
Thank you
thank
so
you
much.
very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Savannah Murray, I believe you're next.
Savannah's not speaking, but I believe Natalie Pien is next.
Okay, Natalie.
Natalie, bear with me just a second. I don't see you in the attendee list. It looks like she's not in the list at this moment. So what is our next speaker?
Let's see. I'm lost my place here. I'm sorry. Amy Altman.
All right.
I believe you're next, Amy.
Amy, promoting you to panelist.
Hi, I wasn't expecting to speak, but since I'm here, you know, I guess I would say to the board that, you
And
know,
Amy, can you share your city that you're coming from today?
oh yes, I'm in Richmond, Virginia. Just, I guess I would just say I wasn't expecting to speak, and normally I speak about the air, but I'm not sure how methane gas affects the water, but I know from what just happened with the leaking pipe in the ocean when it was hit by I think one of the boat's anchors released oil gas that killed so many species and animals, not to mention the release of methane into the air, which, you know, in Virginia, we're about #1 in the country for asthma, and asthma has a 50% mortality rate. Many children have asthma and will die. There is a 50% mortality rate. Okay, so if the board members feel comfortable allowing the pipeline in Virginia, knowing that children will die and adults too will die because of chronic lung disease such as asthma, if they feel comfortable going to bed at night, letting this pass through, well, I just don't know what to say about that. But, you know, that's what will happen. Not to mention climate change and, you know, the methane gas contributing, I've heard that it contributes the most to global warming. So, you know, they should not build this in Virginia. That's all I have to say. That was, sorry, talk more about the air, but as we know, air and water are related. They are two resources we need to live. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think Emily Little is next. And just so, again, you guys can check the chat and we have the lineup there for who's coming up.
And if folks, just as a reminder, can say their name and their city and state if it's not Virginia. Thanks.
Hi there, I'm Emily Little, and I live in Charlottesville, Virginia. And I'm a mother and a nurse, and I'm coming to speak to say that I could not agree more that, like, we shouldn't be doing this thing just because we started doing this thing, this pipeline. We start lots of things, and if it turns out it's a bad idea, we don't actually keep doing it. We change course. Just because we've started this pipeline, we still have the potential to save our waterways. We have the potential to protect the water that our children and our grandchildren are depending on as they grow. We're so lucky. We're so lucky we live in a place where we have clean water to drink. And I think we forget that, like, that might not be something that we have. Because I think for most of us who have lived in Virginia, it's been readily available. We have water. It's clean. It's wonderful. But just because we have something doesn't mean that it's permanent. And I think in this time of climate change, a resource like clean water will become more and more important. And we can see in other parts of the world where their water supplies have been sacrificed and they can't live in the places that they live in anymore because they don't have water. So I think that this MVP project has to be shut down, has to be stopped, because we need clean water in the state. We as people, we as animal lovers, we as nature lovers, and we as parents in particular need to be standing in front of in the way of this MVP project, because it puts our children's health and safety and drinking water in jeopardy. So please stop this pipeline.
Thank you very much, Emily. All right, next in line, Kathy Chandler.
And Kathy, you're muted if you're trying to speak.
Okay, you're still on mute for now.
We can come back to you, Kathy. I think the next speaker, Grace, make sure I'm right, is Rachel Campbell.
Okay.
Here, do you,
Oh, Kathy, sorry.
I think I'm
Okay.
here, but
Yes.
I don't see my face. I had a picture. Is it possible to see me?
We are seeing your name, but not your face.
Yeah.
There you are. We got you. Now you're on mute again. There you go. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I'm Kathy Chandler. I'm a landowner on Bent Mountain, Virginia, in the path of the Mountain Valley Pipeline. We have an access road and half a mile of the LOD going through our property perpendicular to one another. I'm speaking particularly to the Water Control Board tonight. I appreciate this chance to participate virtually. Many of you are new and you were not here when the first permit was offered 4 years ago or more, and we have stayed active in this for very good reasons. There's incredible risk and damage to our property. There was no reasonable assurance for the first permit to protect water quality, and we don't believe that there is reasonable assurance now. Our property had a stream that looked like this before the Mountain Valley Pipeline construction, and that stream currently looks like this. And it is one of 3 sites on our property that face impact from bore sites on the property. I know DEQ is saying that they aren't going to pay attention to bore sites. There's an interagency fracturing of who is responsible for what pieces of water in Virginia. And to say this current permit includes those bore sites in the charts, but DEQ doesn't want to accept responsibility for stream by stream assessment. Mill Creek proper is crossed on our property, only yards away from its confluence with Bottom Creek. The whole plateau of Bent Mountain is affected by over 27 impacted waterways, wetlands, and streams through bore site activity. And MVP's default plan, if any of those bore sites fails, is to do an open cut. So for DEQ to deny us the chance for stream by stream assessment is irresponsible. These bore sites are at the bottom of steep slopes. The streams will be totally unprotected. There's a high risk of failure because of the shallow bedrock, the drilling, blasting, and rock size that's already being found unearthed in the LOD. I also believe that it's irresponsible for the staff to say that the board has preliminarily approved things. I've named before at board control meetings. I don't think you get the full story sometimes. The December 9, 2020 board meeting gave examples of construction on our property, showing that one side of the row was being seeded and straw on a berm and made it look quite tidy. And the other side of the hill had water bars, which you met. What they didn't tell you was these pictures were taken 10 days apart, and you can see both spots from one point on our property. And yet, on this side, on the same date that this was taken, there was actually massive E&S construction rehabilitation going on that didn't show in the photographs. I'm very concerned that the water board doesn't have the full story, that the permit is not adequate to protect the water in Virginia, and certainly not on our property in 3 different places with multiple streams and wetlands. And I ask you to deny the 401 permit.
Thank you, Kathy. Okay, next, Bill Limpert, I believe.
Bill, you're now a panelist and can unmute and speak.
Good evening. My name is William Limpert, formerly from Bath County, now living in Smithsburg, Maryland. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on DEQ's draft permit which would allow the MVP to excavate through 317 streams and 113 wetlands and place a 42-inch natural gas pipeline under all those locations. The State Water Control Board should reject this permit. It would result in numerous water quality violations, a significant threat to the public health, and permanent damage to Virginia streams and wetlands. I will comment on the threats from the MVP leakage. I've completed extensive research on this issue. I will make written comments on the other multiple negative impacts of the pipeline and the crossings to the board at a later time. The MVP would leak toxic pollutants into surface waters, wetlands, and the groundwater. These pollutants would threaten water quality and the public health. A recent study finds that more than 0.3% loss from natural gas transmission lines. MVP actually cited this study in a recent letter to FERC in which they tried to defend their own leakage. Nevertheless, a 0.3% loss equates to a 6 million cubic foot loss per day for the MVP. That's nearly 20,000 cubic foot lost per mile and 4 cubic feet lost per foot of pipeline each and every day. Methane, an extremely potent greenhouse gas, makes up about 94% of the natural gas stream. It would be lost from the MVP. The other 6% of the natural gas stream includes toxins and carcinogens, including volatile organic chemicals and radioactive radon, lead, and polonium. These would be leaked into streams, wetlands, and the groundwater. The EPA has determined that radon causes 21,000 lung cancer deaths per year in our country. They've also found that all counties in Virginia that the MVP would cross are already high in radon. Polonium and lead also form radioactive scales inside the pipes with increased radioactivity over time. The MVP pipes will eventually collapse and radiation will be released into streams, wetlands, and the groundwater. Threats to private drinking water supplies from MVP leakage are especially concerning in karst areas and in the shallow perched aquifer on Bent Mountain. The Virginia Department of Health previously advised that a complete sanitary survey, 1,000 feet on each side of the MVP, should be undertaken to protect citizens who use private drinking water wells and springs. That survey was never completed. Persons living near the MVP are at risk, and that risk has not been adequately assessed. I've consulted with FERC, the Virginia Department of Health, and the US CDC on these threats. FERC and the Virginia Department of Health dismissed these threats while supplying no data to back up their dismissal. CDC does not dismiss these threats. CDC has advised me that there is the potential for public health impacts to private drinking water sources from MVP pipe leakage. The board should reject this permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. All right, David Epson.
And my apologies, Grace, is he under a different profile name?
I have him marked as here, but he may have left. Give me one moment. Looks like he is not on anymore.
Okay.
If you are here, David, please message us. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Georgia Haverty.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, yes, we can hear you.
Okay. All right. My name is Georgia Haverty, and I own Doe Creek Farm in Pembroke, Virginia. I'm speaking directly to the Water Control Board and to DEQ tonight. There are many versions of this sentiment through the centuries. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is that good people do nothing. This is why I'm speaking today, although I realize the decision to approve the 401 permit has already been made if your previous actions over the past several years are any indication. You've been given detailed research and facts by experts and organizations about the dangers to our environment, and yet you do nothing. You hold public meetings to check a box, to let the people of Virginia speak these facts and voice their concerns, and still you do nothing. Most of those who speak in favor of this permit are, as you well know, from Oklahoma and Texas and Iowa and Ohio and Pennsylvania and anywhere but Virginia. I've watched the invasion of my farm for many years, and I have yet to see a vehicle with Virginia tags or to meet anybody who is from here. Jobs, jobs, jobs for Virginians is the loudest justification for all of this destruction. If there were Virginians working on this, jobs would be temporary at best. The reality is money is flowing out of the state and into the pockets of the out-of-state corporation and its shareholders. You are not the Virginia Chamber of Commerce. You are here to be our voice and champions for the environment and for our health and safety, and you continue to do nothing. I've witnessed the mudslides overrunning ineffective erosion controls for years, the most recent being near Doe Creek. This took weeks of cleanup in and around the creek bed. This should be alarming to you, and still you are silent. My farm is fed by a spring, and there are several water lines that cross the pipeline right of way. These were identified well in advance to MVP. They were marked and explained, and still lines were cut several times. MVP was then advised to let us know when repairs were to be made and to repair the lines to our specifications. They did neither on several attempts. During one attempt, a worker tried gluing the line together. A representative as late as this summer thought we had town water and could just turn off the line, even though we had been explaining our gravity-fed spring water with 200 pounds of pressure for several years. This shows an arrogance and unwillingness to recognize their responsibilities. These personal observations of incompetence and arrogance and unwillingness to do the right thing over the years are proof enough to me that granting this permit will be a disaster and that you will be unwilling to do anything about it. In closing, I repeat, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is that good people do nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgia. Okay, Bill Muth, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. M-U-T-H. Sorry if I get that wrong. Hello.
Yes. Get the video here. Hello, my name is Bill Muth. I'm from Richmond, Virginia. I'm speaking on behalf of myself as an individual and my grandchildren and their grandchildren. And I urge you to reject the Clean Water Act 401 permit. I'm limiting my remarks to the global effects of the fracked gas pipeline known as the MVP. There was a time when natural gas held out hope of being the bridge away from oil and coal toward clean energy. But the study of the effects of fracking, including earthquakes and fugitive methane emissions, has expanded considerably over the past decade. Earlier, critical studies were dismissed or obfuscated by the oil and gas industry, and authors' reputations were smeared. But today, there's a consensus that unconventional drilling into shale, the very technologies that will be used to extract fracked gas from the Marcellus and Utica shale formations, producing the gas the MVP would transport, can result in a methane leakage rate of, on average, 5%. This added methane will have a catastrophic effect on climate and doesn't even include the leaks happening during transit. Methane is 80 to 90 times more potent than CO2 as a climate warming agent. It is not enough to argue that just because the project is 52% completed, that we should continue. Today, we know better. We must dismiss false science that fracking is a bridge to clean energy. In fact, fracking leads to more warming than coal or oil, or that methane is mostly an agricultural issue. Not so. In fact, methane has spiked in the atmosphere like carbon dioxide, along with industrialization and the burning of fossil fuels. We know that if we burn the fossil fuels already in production, we'll push the planet beyond the 2 degrees centigrade, that threshold. And the MVP adds to that nightmare scenario at the worst possible time by increasing production and extending our dependence on new fossil fuels for the next 30 years. A Virginia DEQ chief aim is to protect and improve the environment for health, well-being, and the quality of life of all Virginians. But how can Virginia's communities, waterways, wetlands, and forests thrive if droughts, floodings, and other extreme weather events caused by global warming are allowed to accelerate? Please consider the legacy of the DEQ and your stance to the MVP. Based on the testimonials from frontline community members that you have been hearing tonight, as well as the bird's eye view from the scientific community, I urge you to reject the 401 Clean Water Act permit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Akari Hernandez. And again, forgive me if I get your name mispronounced.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, you're on.
Hi, my name is Akari Hernandez. I'm 15. I'm a junior in Charlottesville on Monacan land. I need DEQ to hear that we're in climate crisis right now. This past year, if a place in the country wasn't burning or seeing heat waves, it was flooding. Most of our representatives are pushing their novel idea that climate change is real. Shocking. And that's not enough to save us. We need to deny any new fossil fuel projects, and DEQ needs to lead the way in that if they're really claiming to protect our land. Especially in Virginia, energy companies have a business in the same exploitation of natural resources the first settlers came here with. Their excuses aren't enough anymore. Every pipeline leaks. We've seen it with Line 3 up in Minnesota and with practically every pipeline in US history. There's no such thing as pipeline safety. The Water Board needs to deny the water crossing permit. It's not a matter of land rights, economic growth, or legality anymore. Our future is in the balance of this. And I'm not talking about some sci-fi future or whatever study you say that says 20 years from now, the world will be burning down. I'm talking about next year. Stand with Indigenous leaders, stand with water defenders, stand with the people, and deny this permit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, let me see. Donna Pitt. Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're on.
Thank you, David. I'm Donna Pitt. I'm the coordinator of Preserve Giles County in Newport, Virginia. And I have spoken at the Radford meeting, but I would just like to make a brief statement as to what we believe the State Water Control Board owes us. They are they are appointed by the governor, but they have statutory authority to be the stewards of our clean water. And in order for them to perform that responsibility, they must take into their decision-making process the history of this pipeline and its violations and its disregard for landowners and its disregard for the waterways
and it's disregard for the law, because they have violated the law multiple times and they must be held accountable. The upland water protections that supposedly DEQ imposed upon MVP has been a massive failure. We have ample evidence of that, and we have absolutely no reason to believe that MVP will abide by any other constraints as they attempt to bore under and through waterways. I just read an account of Pennsylvania's impaneling of a grand jury investigation into the Mariner East pipeline. And that owner of that pipeline has been charged with massive dereliction of duty as they bored under and through waterways and deposited massive amounts of toxic chemicals into waterways. I believe this is what we are looking forward to unless this permit is denied. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Okay, Katie Whitehead is up next.
I did not sign up to speak. I will speak really briefly. I am a landowner on the Southgate Extension, MVP Southgate Extension. I'm exhausted at the moment. Still trying to negotiate an easement. A better easement than my parents signed in 1949 for what was then just a Transco easement that has led to 4 pipelines on our property. What do I want to say? I spoke at the hearing in Radford after listening at the hearing in Rocky Mount. I am concerned, as so many speakers are, with the challenges of the route that MVP has taken. I am concerned about the numerous violations and see no way that continued violations cannot be repeated on the really steep terrain. And given the water crossings. I am also, there's no way to speak strongly enough about the IPCC report in August. The urgent, unqualified statement that we need to transition from fossil fuels as quickly as possible. And that's not somebody else. That's us. And I mean, I don't envy anyone on the State Water Control Board, but you are in a position to do more than most of us to respond to that IPCC report. please do. Thank you for nudging me into speaking, though I didn't intend to, and I'll stop.
Well, thank you for being here. Okay, Carolyn Gibbons.
I just want to flag Mr. Strickler is back, so we can add him to the list soon.
He'll go next then.
Okay, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I'm another person that thought I wasn't going to be speaking. I spoke in Radford, but I will take a couple minutes and speak. And much of what I have to say is more about how Mountain Valley Pipeline does not follow their own rules. And in my case, this had to do with karst. I have a farm on the Sinking Creek Mountain in Newport. It goes from Sinking Creek up to the top of the mountain. They have bisected the farm from east to west, about a quarter of a way, third of the way up the mountain. They chose to place the pipeline route within a karst ridge that was clearly identified for them by Draper Aden, who did the survey. There is a cave on that same ridge. I've been told that it was pretty clear there was cave apparent on that ridge using geological software that I don't begin to understand, although I did see it. I was very concerned about that. I actually called Mountain Valley Pipeline employee. Turns out he didn't have any say, probably said nothing to the people that could have done something about it. The long and the short of it is that in 2018, they blew up the top of the ridge. They dynamited it. They never told me they were going to dynamite it. And contrary to their own karst plan of how to mitigate, how to not do that kind of thing, they just went ahead and did it. We found cave walls atop the ridge. We found all kinds of speleotherms. We sent in 2 cave reports that Kirk Bowers put together and Russell Chisholm had drone imagery from when we started having sinkholes and so on. They denied it. I have found they're excellent at not truth telling. So again, this year they went ahead and finished, they had finished the top of the ridge. I was able to stop them from blasting because I also have a spring up on the mountain that feeds 4 farms. So that water comes down into the sinkhole, into the cave on that ridge and flows under the right of way. They didn't know it. In fact, what I discovered was that they knew very little about springs, how water is routed, how water is deeded between farms. They didn't understand any of that. And it wasn't until I just raised Holy Cane that they finally found the pipe that served my farm. So in any event, their lying and their lack of planning and their lack of following their rules really tells me that they should not be getting any more permission to fool with water in our mountains. Not very well said, but there you are. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Carolyn. Okay, I'm trying to catch up here. I think Louis Strickler, we're going to try you again. Let's hope it works this time.
And I did promote the profile, so let me hit that again. Sir, you may have to accept the prompt that comes up on your screen.
Okay, looks like you're unmuted. Hmm. Darn.
Sir, we can email you the telephone number to call in because it looks like your computer connection is still having some sound issues. So
Sorry
unless
about that, but please call in if you can.
I'll take care of that, Lewis. I'm going to actually send you the phone number.
Thank you. Okay, I believe Kay Ferguson is now up. Hello.
I don't really need to speak if someone else needs the minutes. I feel like I've been speaking for 5 years, but I just want to share with the State Water Control Board. I'm Kay Ferguson from Charlottesville, Virginia. I've been trying to support the directly impacted landowners resisting the Mountain Valley Pipeline for not as long as most of you, but for about almost 5 years now. And I am really weary of watching people stand up and beg for their lives. And I feel that we're all doing that now, but I do have great optimism that we have a chance for the State Water Control Board, you, to do the right thing this time. There's been a lot of back and forth about whether you had the power to revoke. Then that power was apparently removed by the legislature, but there's no doubt that you do have the power to deny this new request from Mountain Valley Pipeline for the 401 water quality certification, and that you should deny it. It doesn't matter how complete it is. It doesn't matter how much money they have spent on constructing without the permits, all the permits that they needed. It doesn't matter that how much money they've spent on bullying and oppressing anyone who tried to stop them and are still spending. None of that matters. What matters is the water and the future. And the water is our future. So I have great optimism that with the authority you have now, with your new members, that you will deny this permit. Because the fact is that this permit, with all its flaws and lack of information, will not stand up in court. The Mountain Valley Pipeline will never be built. It will never be finished. But if you pass this certification, and then the Army Corps does, it will be settled in the courts. And what we have right now is a situation where this corporation is sitting on the edge of our waterways, just ready to destroy them as quickly as they can before they're stopped by the courts. So it's not going to be built. It's not going to provide all the economic benefits that are falsely claimed for it to you every time you have a hearing. And it's just a matter of whether you are going to allow them to destroy the water of Southwest Virginia before it's stopped. I urge you to do the right thing now, to use your authority. It's a moral issue. It has to do with the future of our state, our planet, our species, our children, all our children. And I'm hoping that you will do the right thing this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. Okay, I'm going to call on Crystal Mello. I believe you're on the phone, Crystal.
And Crystal, this is Jess. You may have to hit *6 to unmute yourself.
Hey, y'all. Thank you for having this. I also wasn't planning to speak, but I will. When I came, my name's Crystal Miller. I live in Eastern Montgomery County, right up from Elliston, where they're trying to go under Cove Hollow Road, 2 sets of train tracks, 460, and the Roanoke River, all within like a city block. A couple years ago, I witnessed them dig up Cove Hollow and have nonstop water. There's not even water there. They made water. It continues for over a month with multiple failed dewatering techniques that they use. They used a company from like California to try to do something there. Nothing worked, and they just ultimately threw dirt back over it and left that site and dug up every inch of earth around it. I talked to John McClutchin in Richmond, and he informed me that they had abandoned that site due to safety of their workers and the integrity of the area. I have not heard any new plans. When they hit water on the Cove side, right across from Cove, 2 sets of train tracks, and 460, which is 4 lanes of road, that is this small town's only way really in and out of anywhere going towards Salem or Roanoke. They also hit water on the Apgar side, and they immediately stopped digging there, which was smart on their behalf because they knew exactly what was happening on the other side. And to believe that they will not hit water in between those 2 sites, which is 2 sets of train tracks and 4-lane road, I think is pretty probable. It doesn't take a scientist to realize that. And I would really appreciate it if you could deny this permit for the safety of all of us, for our infrastructure in this small town. And please stop this. I know it's far along. They say it's a lot far along. We tell our kids when we're wrong to admit we're wrong, and that can be hard sometimes. Please admit that y'all were wrong and letting this go as far as it has, and do the right thing now. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. Okay, I believe Bridget Kelly is up next.
And Bridget, I did send the notice. If you do want to speak, put a message in the chat because it looked like you declined it. So I don't know if I can resend it and decline it again if you don't wish to speak.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. I think the next speaker is Sabrina Williamson.
Yes, Sabrina Williamson.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, so my name is Sabrina Williamson. I'm from Huntington, West Virginia, but I went to college at Radford and I travel around Appalachia a lot. I wanted to speak a little to how dire the situation actually is for Appalachia, America, and the world. Please don't grant this permit. As a young person who will ultimately be the one to face the climate crisis amongst others, I would like to gently remind everyone that we quite literally do not have time for this. Appalachia has been all but destroyed by pollution. A study published in the New York Times stated that West Virginia will be most vulnerable to flooding as the entire United States in the coming years. As everyone knows, the increase in flooding and other climate disasters is directly caused by pollution. From slurry slides to chemical spills, to just plain incremental pollution from mountaintop removal. This region is literally on the brink of crisis. Now is absolutely not the time to approve this permit. There is no time left to approve this permit. Aside from what we will see in this region, it is important to remember many tributaries in Appalachia lead to the Ohio, which leads to the Mississippi. The Mississippi River provides water for a huge percentage of the country, meaning that if this permit were to be passed in Appalachia, it could have a disastrous effect for the entire country as well. These bodies of waters, the Mississippi, the Ohio, the New River, they're already on the brink of disaster. There's no room nor time left for a pipeline. The IPCC report stated that we pretty much have to start reversing our damage now if we want to have a livable planet. This is the perfect time to set a new precedent for Appalachia and America and join the world in combating climate change. Change starts with rejecting this permit. Do your job. Thank you.
Thanks, Sabrina. All right. So do we have Lewis back?
And if that is you, the 540 number, sir, you may have to hit *6.
There you go. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Thank goodness we finally got you.
I know it.
Okay, tell us where you are, Lewis.
In Roanoke.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So just a quick couple of observations. I've never heard the company MVP prove that there's a need exists for the natural gas at the end point of the pipeline. And I'm wondering if that isn't just a ruse for exporting natural gas overseas in the future. It would seem that need at the end point is not justified, then this is just the first step toward exporting it. And it would appear that legislation would need to require that no natural gas can be exported outside of the United States in the future. The second observation is, why does the Virginia Department of Transportation have to get permission from the U.S. Forestry to make improvements to a state road that crosses a stream to our farm because of preservation concerns for the endangered spiny musselfish, but the forestry and DEQ find it okay to put pipelines across or under 1,000 streams? It seems odd, and I'm also against the way they abuse the eminent domain for a company's personal profit. That's all I had to say.
Thanks, Lewis, and thanks for not giving up. We're glad we finally got you
Okay.
in.
Okay, bye.
Yeah, bye. So I think we're Bridget Kelly, you're up again.
Bridget should be coming to you now.
Okay.
And you are muted, Bridget. Oh, not anymore.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, I'm trying to get this. All right, so I guess I'll just go without the video. Okay. I did speak. My name is Bridget Kelly Deering, and I'm from Lexington, Virginia. And I did speak in Radford. I do have some different comments. There will be a small repeat of what I said before, but I have some new comments. And I've presented comments at every opportunity possible for the last 7 years, and I'm really weary from it and have limited confidence that the DEQ listens or actually takes them seriously. Let me put it that way. I want to begin by thanking Wild Virginia for providing this important online hearing. Neither Governor Northam, nor the DEQ provided it for a hearing for virtual public. And I believe everyone has a right to speak to this proposal in safe and accessible ways during the pandemic. So I thank you. And I'm taking my time today to speak honestly to you about how the DEQ, FERC, and yes, even this body, the State Water Control Board, has not been doing their job to protect the water of Virginians. When I first learned that I was having to fight the DEQ and State Water Control Board to protect the water in my beloved homeland, I was shocked and in disbelief. Since 2015, I've done everything in my legal power to stop this pipeline from the destruction it wields, but to no avail. The hoops we jumped through for the regulatory agencies were only that. Hoops to satisfy the lie that we are being careful with our resources for our future existence. We are not. Our government has not been structured in a way to help us preserve what is essential to live, and that which strikes our very souls with its beauty. We have discovered the hard way that the DEQ, an agency we are supposed to trust to protect us, is actually working to ensure projects like the MVP will be completed. We have exhausted all means to stop what threatens our futures, and the scar of this pipeline, which I drove past today, only reminds us that our government doesn't work for us to protect what we need to live and what we cherish. If a company is allowed to change their intention after permitting for things like food benefits, this speaks to the eminent domain that the last gentleman spoke about, who benefits, public need or corporate gain, or how waterways will be crossed, cross-cut or bore drilling, and regulatory agencies accept them, then our government is not protecting us, but it is in fact working for the corporations, and they are absolutely lying to us. Mountain Valley has failed to present, and the DEQ did not consider the full impact of the Mountain Valley Pipeline project on streams and wetlands. That bears repeating. The Mountain Valley Pipeline has not provided the information necessary to show that it can comply with Virginia's water quality standards. I do not want reasonable assurances that all will be well. We've seen how that worked with the sediment and stormwater erosion control. It didn't. And how were the failures reported? Was it the DEQ? No. Individual water protectors reported incidents resulting in the fine for over 300 violations. Where were the DEQ inspectors? They've admitted they don't have enough of them. Recently, the DEQ allowed the MVP to drill into water on Bibb Mountain and blast, and this is water. They actually don't have a permit to be in water. So there's a failure there. The DEQ said everything was fine up on Bibb Mountain, but no, because they were in a waterway. So I have a problem with this. And why is Mountain Valley Pipeline withholding a full description of the likely impacts from the remaining work to be done? We know the reason is because Mountain Valley Pipeline cannot cross these waterways as planned without causing unacceptable damages and violating state and federal laws. The DEQ must require an extensive stream-by-stream analysis and review. Neither the Corps nor the DEQ has conducted this analysis. The Corps must respect the right of the state and the public to look out for our waters and our interests by allowing a fair and complete process. It should grant the DEQ's request if they did so. At the last State Water Control Board meeting in 2017, some board members, led by Robert Whalen, expressed skepticism that the Army Corps review would be sufficient to protect water quality. No matter if the Army Corps issues the same blanket, one size fits all, or that they do for most pipeline projects, or actually does an individual review. Throughout that hearing, board members themselves expressed concern that they were being asked to put the cart before the horse. That board was missing complete CAR studies and site-specific erosion and sediment control and stormwater management plans. Still, they were expected and pressured to make a critical decision that we no, would, and again for this board, will negatively impact our water and wildlife. It is the role of the State Water Control Board to make informed decisions without pressure from the DEQ, the governor, or the attorney general. So I've already spoken long enough. You know, I could go on about this for probably hours. I'm just going to end this by saying I'm calling on the citizen-led State Water Control Board to reject DEQ's recommendation and deny the Mountain Valley Pipeline Clean Water Act Section 401 draft permit. Please hear my voice and follow the scientific evidence in this most important decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. All right, Steve Paget is up now.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. Yay. Okay, my name is Steve Paget and from Norfolk. And I'm new to this, but I've been following all the testimony from the hearings in Radford and Pigs River. And this one in particular, I mean, it's just such powerful testimony I'm hearing from people that have been doing this for a long time. And I have to say that it's if the water board does not deny this permit, it'll just be an incredible travesty of justice. I mean, this is so obvious to me after all this hearing and listening. I mean, the MVP is out there building right now, not knowing whether they're going to have a permit to do what they're doing right now. And I have, for the life of me, I cannot understand how that can happen, because the whole idea is you permit and you build. But no, they do it opposite. They build and then they try to permit. And then if they can't get the permit, they pay the fine, but they have virtually infinite money, so they don't care about that. So the whole thing is upside down. And I just, it's time to change course. This project, even if it's built, as Kate Ferguson pointed out, it's going to be challenged, and it's never going to really pass delivered gas. So what's the, no matter, and then as far as the DEQ goes, I mean, this is a very, very complex pipeline project, most complicated project ever conducted for pipelines. I mean, it's going over mountains, it's going down 70-degree slopes, it's going over karst. And you know, I looked in the permit and there's not a mention, the new permit, the proposed permit, there's not a mention in that permit about karst. And the whole, you know, there's karst, they're going to be going through, you know, miles and miles and miles, I don't know, 50 miles of, well, 20, 30 miles of karst. And the DEQ just doesn't have the resources to evaluate all this stuff. So they pretty much thrown in the towel. I called the DEQ, they would, about what was happening on Bent Mountain. They refused to talk to me. No one would talk to me. And so they've given up. So it's really up to the water board to just say enough is enough, and we've got to change course. And there's just no doubt about it. And it's gonna, and if they don't, I mean, they're 50%, they say they're 50% through it, but they got the hardest 50% to go. And I talked to one of the pipeline workers when I was out at Pigs River, and he approached me after the hearing and he said, He'd been working 25, 30 years, never seen anything like this. And it's just a disaster waiting to happen. And the disaster, you know, stop it now while it's only 50% done. And then there's no, you know, there's no fixing it after they break it. There's no way to fix these kind of things. I mean, the headwater, sensitive ecosystem of headwater, how do you fix that once you wreck it? It's impossible. So the whole thing, you know, was conceived 7 years ago and ill-conceived, very ill-conceived 7 years ago, and it just has to be stopped. And I want to just give kudos to all the great speakers who have worked so hard and so long on this, and this to stop this insanity. And so thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yes.
Okay, next up is Brandon Riley. I just see a question. Can we get copies of the transcript? We're gonna make all this stuff available. So yes.
All right. Greetings.
Hi.
Awesome. Cool. I just want to say hi to the board. Thank you for opening the forum and being patient and enduring. I've been on this call for a long time, but I've been on it the whole time. And I can just only imagine the amount of effort and work you guys are doing. So I just want to recognize that first of all. I thank my attendees, my colleagues. And I'm Brandon Riley. I'm of Lynchburg, Virginia. First of all, I just want to thank all those who stood in opposition against the Mountain Valley Pipeline and the new water permit, or the water permit. And there's been scores of people who've just taken their time the last 6 years to stand in opposition of the construction of the pipeline. And I'm just indebted to their work, because the things that they're standing against is something that's irreparable. And I have 3 things I want to talk about real quickly: observation, obsolete, and outright unnecessary. I live along the Blackwater Creek in Lynchburg, Virginia, and there is a gas pipeline that runs adjacent to the river. I live right in the bend of the river, so I get to see some pretty cool sights, some really cool nature, and I'm very fortunate for that. But as I walk along the trail, I notice there is a pipe that's not submerged in water. It is about 10 feet above the water, but buried along in the hillside. And every time it rains, my heart sinks as I walk past that trail. I see leaking oil, fluid, something different, something not natural water that belongs in the area, whether it's the rusting of the pipe or whatever phenomenon there is. And that just saddens me to see that we put a pipeline right next to a river or a creek, and that we're continuing to do the same decades later. I had the privilege to work with the EPA and the Department of Groundwater Drinking Water right in DC, and I've helped build help the transition go from the interweb to the internet, to the internet rather, and had the privilege of looking at all the data sources. I'm an engineer, and I've was blown away by the amount of contamination that existed in the water across the nation, just on a regular basis. Not saying that, and it kind of curiosity drew me to look are there any water sources in America that don't have any violations? And the answer was no. And this was back in 2005, before the topics of Flint were really exacerbated or made public headlines, before so many other different water systems had issues that were publicly made known. And there are other water systems in greater than plant that had water issues. So what relevance does this have to the streams and rivers? Well, in my experience and in the data that I've seen, there are things that are allowed by the EPA to be in the water sources because there's literally no way to get them out or no way to keep them from being in there. So there's things called allowable limits. And I think the whole part of this hearing is we're talking about land and water streams and sources that could never be fixed once a leak happens. And by my experience, looking directly at the pipeline that is adjacent to my house or perpendicular to my house, I see that there's leakage of some sort from this particular pipeline. How does that affect? What does it look like long term down the road? It is inevitable that gas that this pipeline would carry will become obsolete, whether it's 10 years from now, 50 years from now, or 500 years from now. But the damage that it will leave because of its existence, if we permit it to go on, will be indefinitely. Outright unnecessary. One of my colleagues, or one of the fellow people who stood up against the pipeline, mentioned that there's landfill gas that could be recaptured and is producing tons of methane, and it could be bought a lot cheaper than the construction they're using to carry the pipeline. The investment to the future of solar or wind, that would be the more right way to go for the owners and stakeholders of the pipeline. But I understand they're set on making money in this particular route. And I think that they should find a different revenue stream instead of inevitably polluting the beautiful rivers and streams, which is shared among all Virginians and all our visitors. I stand in opposition to the Mountain Valley Pipeline, the permits, anything that would continue or further the destruction of our beautiful habitat and our beautiful Virginia. I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Deb Kushner.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Deborah Kushner. I live in Stanton, Virginia. I did not appear at the other two hearings because of distance, time of day, and COVID. So I appreciate this opportunity now. I don't have prepared comments, so please forgive my rambling. I know I'll forget some very important things, but I wholeheartedly object to the 401 certification that's been proposed, and I urge the board to reject the certification. I applaud the board for wanting to serve on this board to protect the most precious of our resources. And as we've seen in other parts of the country, when water isn't to be had, it's worse than a disaster. There's no replacing it. I've seen some of these most precious places that are being threatened, that have already been harmed beyond repair. And my head and my heart ache for what's already happened. So the board has the power to stop this. Pipelines and fossil fuels should be stopped. The climate can't take more. We've seen this. The scientists agree. I concur with all the comments I've heard this evening. The Mountain Valley Pipeline has proved that they are not competent to construct this pipeline. The route was completely erroneous. To route a pipeline through karst, steep slopes, beautiful, pristine areas where endangered species exist. I mean, what a total disaster from the onset. Just shorthand, many, many reasons why this permit should not go through. Methane, radon, karst. It's just, the list is everything that's been enumerated. So I urge the board to stand strong. I understand that it takes a great will to stop something that's already in progress and to stand up to the DEQ, but it must be stopped, period. This is wrong in every sense of the word. So please look at what's been done, understand that it cannot continue if this area and its inhabitants and its creatures are to exist. Please stop it now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next person is E. Merritt.
And eMerit, I think it is not letting me promote you, so I'm going to hit allow to talk. And let's see if that works.
Okay.
And you should be allowed to talk. I don't know if you're actually calling in and have to hit *6, but you have been unmuted on our end.
You're still showing as muted.
And it is not letting me promote you to a panelist, but you should be unmuted. Let me try one more thing. You may get a prompt of me asking you to unmute. Okay, and I see it notified us that you declined the panelist. So if you want to put it in the chat, if you do want to speak, we'll come right back to you.
Yep, just let us know. Okay, Kelly Hingler.
I'm sorry for the delay, Kelly. You should be get a notification in just a moment.
Hello?
Hello. We can hear you.
Hello. I am calling from the James River, Nansemond River, and Chuckatuck Creek and the Chesapeake Bay watershed. We did have a quite an experience with the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, which you would hope, as I speak to you, DEQ and Water Control Board, that we would have learned from that lesson. We're all very respectful. I'm a United States military veteran. I'm a physician assistant, have been for 30 years. I have traveled all over the Commonwealth of Virginia. I am Virginia born. I've also traveled all over California. I've seen the devastation there of bygone decisions. I've seen the devastation in Pennsylvania because I have family there with that pipeline. So as a clinician, I say to the public health question and to VDH, which is not under the control of the Water Control Board and DEQ, please look at your regulations. You have control over well water. and well water safety. Also, EPA environmental justice forums are being held tomorrow, just so you know, at 2 p.m. I will be there. I, myself, and everyone in the Chesapeake Bay watershed are standing strong for our watersheds in Virginia, because under the Virginia Constitution, it doesn't matter if I'm in the Chesapeake Bay watershed or standing at that pipeline in that stream where it should not be going. Virginia's Constitution states 25 or more people, 25 or more people standing together, this is old English common law, is a consensus. The Water Control Board and DEQ is not Virginia Commerce or U.S. Commerce. We are states that form a union. That perfect union is America, but we are the state of Virginia. Within these bounds of Virginia, we, the Virginians, and I will say to you as an act of faith and trust, which will be accepted by the court, that there are more than 25 just here. We're a waterman village. We know water quality issues. We've seen what has happened over the last 20 years with $46 million and 100 jobs ripped away from DEQ. There are all of 2 inspectors for Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act in the entire state, okay? And it's very broad, not just the watershed, but the airshed, of which this pipeline also affects. It is under the auspices of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act under its air quality arm, because that air quality shed is enormous and goes beyond the Commonwealth of Virginia. I also want to speak to Indigenous, okay? When the Commonwealth of Virginia took $46 million out of the general fund and sheared it off of DEQ, shearing off 100 jobs over the last 20 years, it is undermanned. That will be presented in court. We do not have the capacity to do things backwards. You cannot go back to FERC, but I speak to FERC. You know your job was to make sure that there was an economic reason for this pipeline in 2017. We're in 2021. This natural gas pipeline is actually a phase out, okay? We're walking into other clean energy right now. And when we come all the way back full circle to what I said about Indigenous peoples, really, North Carolina rejected the permits, and now we're heading straight for Southgate. We're heading right over the Carolina line, is what MVP believes. We now have, and I do not speak for the tribes, I speak in all solidarity with all Indigenous peoples, okay, that you will not do what you did with ACP. You will not. You did not give tribes ample time, and at that time frame in 2017, we didn't have the federal recognition of all the tribes that we have now. They were not allowed to have that voice. They were only state recognized because of that 1924 racial equity law that segregated out our Indigenous people. That has now come forward since 2017. We now have our federally recognized tribes. If you do not have feedback from all of the federally recognized tribes and state tribes in the Commonwealth of Virginia, I tell you, stop what you're doing, stop what MVP is doing, go back and do the work. You have to. That is the law. If you did not get their permission before, you must have it now. And every Virginian, the 25 or more consensus that I'm talking about, the attorneys know what it is. We are standing side by side, much larger than 25 just out of the Chesapeake Bay watershed, much more than 25 just out of our community here on the James River. We know what's going to happen with the Roanoke River and the Albemarle Sound. You're sending all of these pollutants down the Roanoke, out that sound, out that watershed into the ocean. To our seafood industry and commerce in Virginia, no. To the water right there, all along the MVP pipeline. That water is our birthright. It's in our Constitution. It's in our Bill of Rights. We have a right. Our Constitution was the Constitution. Our Bill of Rights in Virginia is the Bill of Rights that set the tone for the American Constitution. This may seem like it's outside of DEQ, but we're telling you, we know you're undermanned and outgunned since 2017. That work needs to be repeated because it will be found having fallen short. The CDC, yes, is aware of the contamination issues. We're calling out to our people in the community to reach out, might sound odd, to their CMS, to their Medicare product, and their Medicaid product, because this is a pure violation of a health factor, environmental factor, and public health, where in public health, we look at policy and outcome. We are so far ahead of any process, it is undue burden to the entire public of Virginia, the entire airshed of the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and every watershed from Pennsylvania through West Virginia and what is in your domain in Virginia. This is beyond. You do not put projects ahead. Army Corps of Engineer, reaching out to you. That manual that is dated back in 1987 that you operate from is not your fault that it's that outdated, 1987, but you do have a responsibility as the active regulatory arm of EPA stormwater, to have in control the ability to understand where the karst is, where these waters and streams are, and to assure that no one is getting a permit in those areas that can be so
Kelly?
violated, there's no way to mitigate. And so I think I've come full circle. I think I've hit everyone. And I thank all of you for staying so strong for so long. And good night, and thank you for letting me add my comments.
Thank you. Okay, next up is Tom Elliott.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, you're on.
So speak to the Water Control Board. It's your duty to protect our water, as the last speaker just spoke well about, to protect the water of Virginia for the people of Virginia. If this is not a situation where our water should be protected, what is? You have toxic pipes leaking, chemicals, out of control sedimentation, fragile perched aquifers being blown up, radioactive scale in the pipes, failure of the pipes, the methane leaks. Please do not take for granted this precious resource that our children will rely on. This out-of-state corporation with over 300 violations. I know that there is a great deal of pressure, and it's a difficult job that you have. I respect your desire to serve the people of Virginia. And I was there when the Air Quality Control Board, some members asked some questions and were immediately removed by the governor. I know that there's all kind of pressures on you guys to allow this corporation to continue to make its money. But this is an important time in history. This moment requires courage. It requires a moral fortitude to do the right thing. This is not right. This is not right for people's land to be taken, for people from another state to come and cut down our trees and not care about the water that our farms use. Please understand the consequences of your decision. Consequences for our water. And with this very clear descriptions of the problems with this pipeline, the consequences for your decision for yourself. How could this be allowed to happen? That's all that I can say right now. It's been many years of standing and trying to speak and feeling not heard, feeling that the decisions were already made. But this is not the case now. You have the chance to stand up and begin this process of protecting our water and giving us a chance to live. Please do that. Decline the 401. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next up is Amy Shea. Hello.
Hello, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. I am here tonight to request that the board decline the 401.
I'm sorry. Can you just say your name and where you're?
I'm Amy Shea. I'm calling in from Salem, Virginia.
Great, thank you.
I lived in Ronto, Virginia for 13 years, the longest I've ever lived anywhere, on the banks of the Roanoke River. And I was not prepared to speak tonight, so I'm just going to wing it. I've spoken to you before, most recently in Rocky Mount. I'm a lifelong Virginian. I love Virginia for everything it offers. The beautiful mountains, the ocean, the four seasons, such as they are at this point in the climate crisis. I stayed here basically in Southwest Virginia to raise my children, and also because I love it. But raising my children here, they have also come to love everything that this beautiful area of the country has to offer. And it breaks my heart that we are still having to fight against new pipeline infrastructure when obviously we need to be not building new pipeline infrastructure. It's obvious to me anyway. I feel like, you know, the world is on fire, and I can't believe that we're still having to fight this. It's like a cognitive dissonance constantly when I think about this. Water cannot be replaced. It cannot. There's nothing else, you know, and it's a component of everything that we need. We have to have clean water to live. There are options other than fracked gas. We need to be looking at other options because water can't be replaced, and energy sources can be changed out. We need to be looking at other things. Besides the destruction of the water, methane is 80 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon. That is something that is really so often overlooked. I heard somebody on NPR the other day who didn't realize how potent methane is. And it kind of blew my mind to hear him talking about that, because I guess we've been fighting this for 7 years now, and it's something that I've known all along. Methane is 80 times more potent a greenhouse gas than carbon. Methane does dissipate more quickly, but while it's there, it is much more potent. We just shouldn't be building new fracked gas infrastructure. We just really shouldn't. And the other point I wanted to make is we're not the only beings being affected in this. We are deciding this for all the creatures that inhabit this area and inhabit this world, because all the water is connected, all the air is connected. It's not just Southwest Virginia that's being affected by this. It's all the water and all the air. These other creatures can't speak. We have to speak for them. We have to fight for them. The web of life is important. I don't know if you've ever read about it, but like, you know, when the wolves were taken out of certain parks, things fell apart. When you take out one piece of the web, things fall apart. And we have a lot of fragile creatures in this area who are being threatened by this pipeline, threatened by the sedimentation. And taking out any one of those creatures is going to have an impact on the whole area, the whole ecosystem. And I also just want to say, as an emotional appeal, I have a 19-year-old and a 22-year-old, and they feel pretty hopeless about the future. They don't want to have children. They don't think that there's a good future for the children. And I ask you to please think about that when you're pondering whether or not to support this permit. Our water and our environment are priceless. There's no planet B. Water is life. Please stand strong and be on the right side of history. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Okay, Neil Sturman. You're still on mute. There
Hi,
you
can
go.
you hear me now?
Yes, we got you now.
Hi, I just had a couple things to say. My name is Neil Sturman. I live in Franklin County. I've seen the construction of the Mountain Valley Pipeline, and I've seen it muddy the waters around Franklin County and Roanoke County. And it runs very close to the Blackwater River, which feeds into Smith Mountain Lake. And it's about 2 miles away from Smith Mountain Lake on 122. And I'm afraid it's going to affect the water clarity and the pollution in Smith Mountain Lake and the feeding rivers into that. And I'm concerned also about the abuse of eminent domain for this pipeline. That's not what eminent domain is supposed to be used for. Not for the profit of private companies. And I just echo what other people have said. The gentleman said that he walks by a pipeline that's rusty and contaminating his water source. And I can see that happening in the future for this pipeline if it's approved. So I would like this permit denied. This is the first time I'm speaking about this. That's about all I had to say to that. I just would like it to be denied and just wanted to add my personal opinion. And thank you for the board for doing this and bringing this forum onto Zoom meeting. And I hope it makes a difference because, as other people have said, a lot of these proposals already, not approved officially, but they seem to be approved before the general public gets to speak about it, and that's not a good thing. We're the residents, the local residents of that get affected the most, and we should really have the most say about what happens in our areas and to protect our waters and the species that also live and thrive by these waters. And that's about it. Thank you for listening.
Thank
Hope
you.
you're successful.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, Josh Vanna.
Hey, Josh, send in that notification one more time.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, sure can.
Okay, thank you. I would like to echo the last caller in thanking the board, bringing this hearing to a Zoom call to the people. And to that, I mean the board of Wild Virginia, the board of Appalachian Voices, and the board of the Power Coalition, the coalition groups that have been fighting this disastrous project for several years now. To the other board, which has not brought this hearing to a Zoom call or a remote opportunity for the people, I would like to speak to the State Water Control Board here, as I have before many other times in this process and many others. The State Water Control Board should ask a few critical questions of the DEQ. The first should be, what does a reasonable assurance mean? This is the language of the draft permit for 401. And it is pretty much the same as the language for the last 401 permit that MVP was granted and violated essentially every condition of. The reasonable assurance that I have, if the board would like a point of reference, the only reasonable assurance that I have is that headwater streams in our mountains will again be clogged with construction mud runoff, and that maybe even once again, we might have an 80-foot section of 42-inch pipe washing down the Blackwater River in Franklin County. So I don't know what the DEQ thinks a reasonable assurance means, but judging by the hundreds of violations of MVP's lateral one, I don't see the record changing an awful lot. Second question the board should ask the DEQ is, what happens if the conditions of the permit are not complied with? To answer this question, I think for yourselves, the board, given that DEQ will probably not give a reliable answer or not reasonably assure you, I suppose, would be that the DEQ is probably not going to do anything, will hand out no meaningful punishment, and will not stop the pipeline, and will try to convince the board at every opportunity that there's nothing the board can do now that maybe the permit is passed again. Third, does the DEQ have the intent of enforcing the permit and the law? Will the DEQ enforce the conditions of the permit and make sure that the conditions are met, that the law is upheld, that the waters of Virginia are not harmed? I would argue from the last 3.5 years that it would be a little insane to think that the DEQ will do this, especially as the DEQ throws up its hands and tells us that they are under-resourced, understaffed, and underfunded. So my rhetorical question here would be, why are you issuing permits? Why do you want to issue permits that you cannot and will not enforce? So that would be a good one for the board to really press DEQ on, though I would caution the board that when you start asking critical questions of the leadership of the DEQ, you may be accused of working for the opposition. And if you're wondering who the opposition is the people who DEQ is supposed to be protecting from pollution. Through every step of this process, going back to 2017, the DEQ has segmented these discussions on proposed permits in ways that have narrowed public comment and shut out expert advice. This coalition fighting these pipelines has brought the testimony of water quality experts from all over, And that has not been enough, apparently, to convince the DEQ that they need to do their job and deny these permits. I sort of recall during the first time we were discussing the 401 permit in 2017, that commenters were not allowed to discuss erosion, sediment control, and stormwater management, which, if anyone is paying attention here, seems to be the crux of the issue. And through this process, as the waters of Virginia have been harmed hundreds of times, as well as the people connected to them and depending on them, the DEQ has shown up to the board with reviews of whatever MVP is doing at the time, basically repeating the language of Natalie Cox, the PR person for the Mountain Valley Pipeline, and has provided what I would opine as pretty embarrassing presentations that propose to the board that 2 + 2 = 5, and that everything is fine with the Mountain Valley Pipeline. So I would ask that, you know, the board wants to hear from the experts. Okay, there are several water quality experts probably on this call who have already laid out everything you need to know. And the other experts are the people who have this pipeline running through their backyard. And I think that if the board were to have this pipeline running through their backyard, they might have a similar opposition as we do. They might also think that this draft permit needs to be laughed off the table and the permit denied. So, one, reasonable assurance. There is no reasonable assurance. Two, will the conditions be complied with? No. There has been no past compliance and there will be no future compliance. There should be no further construction of the Mountain Valley Pipeline, no more water body crossings. It's going to be a disaster. And the board and the DEQ both would be abdicating their responsibility to protect the waters of Virginia if they issued the permit. So my final question to this board is, if all of this expert testimony from landowners who've lost their farms, their businesses, who have had their health compromised, if the board is going to once again turn their backs on that testimony and appeal to a thinly veiled political goal of the Northam and McAuliffe administrations, I would ask that the board not act like they cared. Just be honest. Just be upfront and say, look, there's a political goal that has precedence here, and that's what Virginia is going to get. So if that doesn't leave a great taste in your mouth, I would say it's time to stand up and do the right thing. Buck the DEQ leadership. State that 2 + 2 does not = 5. That you will not participate in magical thinking, and that this pipeline has no place among the waters of Virginia. Thank you.
Thank
And might have forgotten to say, my name is Joshua Van. I live in Albemarle County outside of Charlottesville.
There you go. Thank you. Okay, Maple Osterbrink. Hi.
Hi, my name is Mary Ann Maple. I go by Maple Osterbrink. I live in Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Great.
This is the picture of my granddaughter.
Hmm.
Her name's Olivia. It used to be about grandchildren and polar bears, but obviously most people who read anything know that now it's now and it's here. And it's getting worse all the time. We are supposed to have this extension, which will not be built, as Kay said, and my friends that have already talked. But we have to go through the motions to do all this and go to court and stuff because the powers that be don't defend us. You know, it's sad, it's pathetic. We did win against ACP down here. We did a lot of groundwork. I spent 3.5 years of my life every day, including Sundays, fighting ACP. So I'm kind of used to all the lingo, but it's different down here. I've been learning tonight. We don't really have karst. It's different. Some of the local conditions are different. But companies do the same thing. The EQT company is similar to ACP, which is Dominion. And you should know as the board that Dominion gave $58 million to Governor Northam and the same exact amount to Governor Cooper after our good DEQ was going back and forth and we were fighting here on our 401. Our only right, is our state permits. The only way to fight the federal takeover of, and the world, oil runs the world. So it's our only chance is our little state permits that we can actually say no to something. So that's why we're all saying we need you to step up and be there and defend our state with at least that. Otherwise, there will be suits. And so that drags it out. And then we're going to win with all this evidence and stuff and scientists. I mean, how could it be good? People fighting, sitting in trees for over a year. One girl, I went to court over her. And MVP didn't even have the right state. They had permission from FERC and it said Virginia and she was actually in West Virginia. So they couldn't even do that right, get out of the trees that we want to cut down and make no carbon sequestration, make it worse and pollute and make methane even worse in the world. So it's pretty bad. We've come to this and people are warriors. I know a lot of these people and I know the woman in the mirror. It's not in my backyard, but it's in my neighbors and my fellow planet people. And it's messing up my future. And I'm 67. I plan on living into my 90s. So I'm going to see the temperature rise. And so for Olivia and myself, that's, most of the reason I'm here, kind of for selfish reasons, but for my friends who are also fighting every day for free. And I really respect the citizen, all those violations, the 300, they've done classes. I went to some of the classes, they're amazing. Virginia people are tough as nails, North Carolina in a different way as well. So I could say a lot more about the flooding and, illegal wetlands are federally protected, but somehow, and I fight FERC as well, they get away with making an excuse like, well, we don't really have to follow those laws. So it's very, very twisted and very messed up. And the people that have a lot more money than us, like Hathaway, what's his name? I had to look up his name. Warren Buffett and all them and the Koch brothers, they're trying to still hang on to their ruling of our world, and we need to not let them. So we got to do everything we can, and it's going to add up to a win. I fought the NED up in New England. I lived up there. We won against that one. That was Kinder Morgan. They backed out, and then ACP, we won against ACP. So I want to count 3 wins for myself on these pipelines. I don't want to lose. So let's just help me win quicker, me and my friends, and do the right thing now so we don't have to drag it out into Kingdom Come, because we'd like to get back to our own lives. We'd like to do what we like. We'd like to take a hike on a Sunday instead of thinking we have to sit at our email and do yet another document. It's getting to be a real drag. I've spent almost 10 years of my life fighting for climate. It's scary. So I love my fellow people here. And I even would probably enjoy having dinner with you water board people at your house. We probably have pretty much everything in common. Love of water, love of food, love of earth, love of our kids, etc. So thanks for listening to our pleas tonight and our demands. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. If there's anybody else here who wants to speak, if we passed over anybody, please let us know. Put a note in chat, and we want to make sure we don't miss anybody. It looks like we may have gotten through the list. Wow. Okay. One more chance, everybody. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay. Well, thanks for everybody who made it to the end. Thanks for being here. And as we said, we're going to get all this into the water board so they can consider it. So good night all.